Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
Hey, it's Fire Chief Jerry Strike from the Andover Fire Department in Minnesota, and you're listening to the SA Matters radio show with Dr. Richard Gassaway. His mission is to help us see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes.
Hello, and welcome to episode 73 of the Situational Awareness Matters radio show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this show is to improve situational awareness and decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-risk, high-consequence environments. The SA Matters mission is simple, to help you see the bad things coming in time to avoid bad outcomes. If you've experienced or witnessed a near miss and would like to have a platform to share your lessons learned with others, please contact me by visiting the SAMatters.com website and clicking on the Contact Us link on the top of the homepage. Have you ever given thought to this? That your lessons learned from your near miss could save someone else's life? Think about that for a moment. And if you're willing to share that gift of your experience, contact me. I'm coming to you today from Emmitsburg, Maryland, where I'm in town to deliver a presentation for the National Fire Academy's Executive Fire Officer Program Graduate Symposium. Tomorrow I'm delivering a 20-minute TEDx-inspired presentation that the NFA calls Chuck Chats, named after the now-retired Executive Fire Officer Program Chair Chuck Burkell. The topic I'm presenting on is creating the thinking firefighter. This is a short presentation, but it will make a powerful and compelling argument that many casualty incidents result from firefighters not thinking. Rather, they are acting in automatic formation based on training. I will share how we can change the way we conduct our training to create the thinking firefighter, thinking before acting, making decisions based on alternatives, using situational awareness as the foundation. In today's episode, I interview the author of the book Hoarding Homes, Piles of Hazards for Firefighters. Ryan Pennington is a firefighter paramedic for the Charleston, West Virginia Fire Department. He's currently assigned to Station 6 that houses Quint 456 and Medic 436. He has over 20 years of combined fire, rescue, and EMS experience. Ryan started with his local volunteer department and continued through EMS and spent 5 years as a critical care paramedic. Ryan transferred to the Career Fire Service in 2003 and has worked for the Charleston Fire Department since 2007. Ryan is a leading authority on heavy content responses, also known as Hoarder responses. He is a highly sought-after instructor, speaker, author, and blogger and podcast host. Ryan has lectured and trained thousands of firefighters and fire departments from across the U.S. and internationally, both at their departments and at large conferences like Firehouse Expo, FDIC, Firehouse World, and FDIC Atlantic in Canada. He has been published in Fire Rescue Magazine, Fire Engineering, Firefighting in Canada, Firehouse, among others, and has been interviewed on the top firefighter training podcasts and radio shows throughout the U.S. He is the founder of ChamberofHoarders.com, which is the leading heavy content response online training academy for fire departments worldwide. This website is the best heavy content online training academy that exists. It also contains heavy content fire news, case studies, interviews, podcasts, and more, fully dedicated to training firefighters on the risks and best practices for heavy content fires. Ryan blogs and podcasts about the views from the jump seat level firefighter at jumpseattraining.com. To learn more about the heavy content firefighting and options for training your department, you can visit chamberofhoarders.com and click on the Contact Ryan link. I'll also include his email in the show notes for this episode. We begin this conversation with where the inspiration came from for him to focus on the challenges of providing emergency services in the hoarded environment. Let's jump into our interview with Ryan Pennington.
Well, thanks, Rich. The inspiration for this book actually came from a response in my home fire department's district. They responded on a confirmed working fire with a occupant that was on the telephone with the dispatcher saying, "I'm upstairs, I'm burning to death." So they had a very complex rescue. It took them approximately 33 minutes, and in the process of it, they sent 3 firefighters to the hospital. Luckily, there's that word that keeps creeping up every time I talk about hoarding fires, is luckily there were only minor injuries, 1 exhaustion, 1 smoke inhalation, and 1 firefighter that had fallen through the floor into the basement because of the extended burn times that was experienced. Then, unfortunately, the occupant did not make it from the. We would assume that was the byproducts of combustion, but that started the wheels turning and really diving into this topic. And what I found when I started Google searching and reaching out to fire departments around the world is no one had really discussed the tactical changes when dealing with at the time. I didn't know it, but they called them Collier's Mansion conditions. So a lot of information was out there from the psychological community about the affliction, the mental health treatment awareness. But no one had really taken the time to develop operational standards. What do we do when we're faced with a house that's anywhere a level 1, 2, 3, or 4? How do we handle the extra workload for firefighters? How do they stay oriented inside if you're searching it? And it all comes down to the main question is Ryan, this is a risky environment. Is the risk versus the reward? And each one of those topics I cover in the new book. Each one of them gets their own chapter, and we break it down into offensive, defensive, and risk versus reward, among other chapters in the book, Rich.
Ryan, you talked about level 1, 2, 3, 4. What are the levels, and is that something that was out there already, or is that something you created?
There was some scales out there, none of them that was based towards first responders. So I based the scale that I came up with on a scale that was produced by the International Study Group for Chronic Disorganization. And there's a couple different scales out there, the 1 through 10, but the one that I chose was a 1 through 5 heavy content environment scale. And those were based on clinical evaluation. How afflicted are they? How deep into the disorder or how bad are they afflicted? So while that is important for us to understand as first responders, I wanted to break it down into tactical things, so such as structural integrity, accessibility. How hard is it to get in? Can we get out of it? The interior layouts, special hazards, such as utilities that are disconnected, but utilities that are being stolen from other areas. So an example would be they're in the eviction process. They disconnect the power because of inability to meet the bill, and what they do is they'll just stretch an extension cord from their neighbors' houses. And then additional resources, whether that's additional firefighters needed to battle the clutter, or whether that's additional resources such as animal control or a building demolition company, or even a hazmat. I mean, a hazmat crew to come in and clean the firefighters after the firefight. So the heavy content scale that I chose was a 1 through 5, and it's based on the levels. So a level 1 would be just some household clutter, there's some trash cans overflowing, well below knee level. All rooms are still usable. And then it goes all the way up to a level 5. And level 5 would be an example is they feel the house so full that they can no longer live there. So they'll cut the utilities, they'll move to a different location, and they'll seal that up as a storage container, basically like a big garage. But it's so full they can no longer occupy the house. And those can be really the most dangerous. Number one, because of the overloading of the structure, but number two is folks find their way in there. They realize that they're vacant, and they'll find their way in there. Whether that's teenagers trying to get away from their parents, or whether that's some homeless folks looking for a warm place to stay. And with the utilities being disconnected, the way that they use the way that they heat it and use for light is a lot of times small fires or candles, and those can be the most dangerous. Because firefighters, if they can't capture the cues and clues of the heavy content, they're going to go crawling into it just like a standard house fire, 1 3/4 through the front door, and that's where they can really get into some really big problems.
So, what are those clues and cues that we should be looking for in the let's just start with the 911 call. Is there anything that dispatchers could or should be asking the caller that might tip the dispatcher that the call is to a heavy content or hoarded condition environment, and then take it from there as far as the responders arriving and sizing up? What do they see that would indicate that they might be dealing with a heavy content fire?
I love having the dispatchers in my class, Rich. It's so awesome that you bring the dispatchers in there. I think that they are, I won't say forgotten, but most are often overlooked resource that we have. And especially the dispatchers that sit through the class can direct questions. If they hear terms such as they're blocked inside because of doors that are covered in clutter, or a lot of times they'll say, hey, this person is a hoarder. I mean, hopefully they don't repeat that message over the airwaves. They use the term a heavy content environment. But there's some simple cues and clues that they can capture. Caller advises the doors are locked or blocked. Caller advises the clutter in the interior is not allowing the people to escape. Caller advising there's a surface fire that's happened on the exterior. Their mother is a hoarder. I mean, these are all things that the dispatcher can do. And if we capture those cues and clues en route, we need to start thinking A plus B equals C. Hey, maybe we have some indications where we need to dive a little bit deeper during our 380-degree size up. And I did say 380 degrees. So we normally arrive on scene. We establish our first capture of the image. You look at it, and you're looking for privacy fences, overgrown shrubberies, overgrown trees, anything that they can use to conceal exterior yard clutter. Now, these assessments vary between a municipal district and a rural district. A municipal district has building codes. Most often, the front yards cannot have extensive amounts of clutter in it versus a side yard or a backyard. That's why the importance of doing a complete walk around is increased, because if you don't do a walk around and you can miss the cues and clues of a heavy content environment, especially in a municipal district. So as the officer or firefighter riding the seat, they want to start capturing it. Is the shrubbery overgrown? Is there multiple storage buildings? Is there high privacy fences? Are they trying to conceal something? And as they walk around, they need to look for storage sheds. Something that I didn't really catch on to until I was teaching out in Missouri is every single picture that I have in my presentation has a blue tarp in it. And if you really think about it, a blue tarp is basically something to keep the weather off another section of their collection. So if you see a blue tarp, if you see some storage racks, it was a very interesting case out of Shepherdstown, West Virginia. They actually established some shelving on the exterior of the house. So if you capture these cues and clues, you need to go poke your head in or around a window and kind of confirm what you're suspecting. If nothing else, you need to start thinking, hey, number one, this is a heavy content environment. We're thinking about a collapse issue, but we're also thinking about the heavy workload that the firefighters will be facing dealing with this situation. So an example would be Engine 1 or dispatch to Engine 1, respond for the structure fire. Callers advising victim is a hoarder and they're still inside. You arrive on scene. This is Engine 1. We've got a 2-story wood frame dwelling, we've got a working fire. We'll be using an offensive strategy, and we've identified there's overgrown shrubs and trees surrounding the whole side sea of the house. The officer goes out, does their 360 or 380 degree size up. We notice some clutter in the yard. We notice some overgrown shrubberies. We're going to go take us some time and look inside their vehicle that they still ride in, not the dilapidated one with the flat tires. We identify that there is a clutter in the vehicle. At this point, the incident commander needs to get on the radio and say, listen, this is dispatch from command. We've got a whatever XYZ. This is what we're doing. This is a heavy content environment. Pick up the radio and say, send me some additional resources, whether that's a second alarm or whether that's a 1-in-1, whatever your policies and procedures do, because we need some extra manpower at that point. And then you can go into your tactical assessment and your CAN report and your risk versus reward at this point. But that would be kind of we've captured it on dispatch, we've captured it upon first arriving, we confirmed it during the walk around. Now we're going to adjust forward afterwards.
If there's a person inside, which I would assume, I guess I shouldn't assume, I'd rather ask. If a person is at home with a fire in a hoarded environment and they are the hoarder, are they likely not to leave because of their perceived value and their feel to need to protect their hoard? I mean, I don't know enough about the mental condition there to know. I mean, would they die amongst their hoard, or are they smart enough that when they smell or see smoke, they're going to leave?
I've never really found a occupant that's unwilling to leave. Now, I will tell you that we've had 3 case studies where the occupant continues to run in and out of the house. One of them actually perished in north of Philadelphia. He ran in and out of his middle-of-the-road townhouse, and on the 3rd time, he did not reappear. So I really can't really say for sure that they won't let you pull them out, but it's really important for us to understand that the chance of them running back in is there. The chance of them going back inside to protect their perceived treasures is absolutely there, and it can really cause some trouble for us. I mean, imagine if you roll up with a 3 firefighter first due engine and you physically have to restrain an occupant. I mean, you've basically taken your fire crew and just the fire's going to go uncontrolled because, number one, priority is protecting that occupant's life.
Mm-hmm. So does somebody have to be assigned to the occupant to
I would
make
recommend
sure they're
it.
not going back in?
I would recommend it. I would recommend to go ahead and have them removed from the environment. Now, we want to try to do that in a positive, supportive way. Say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, we understand these are your belongings. We're going to need some time to get this fire out. We'll give you a call afterwards. Maybe use your EMS providers or our law enforcement officials to do that, because, I mean, let's face it, with our staffing nowadays, our firefighters are going to be busy. So if we can remove them from the stimulus, even if that means taking them across the street and putting them inside someone's house, hopefully their neighbors or somebody like that would come out. So that way we're guaranteed that we've got them secured. Now, I mean, there has been one case study in particular that they actually had to handcuff the occupant and remove them from the scene because of the compulsion to protect the belongings.
What are some of the odd things that hoarders do that would be, say, different or would create special challenges? You'd mentioned, them borrowing power from their neighbors, and maybe that's not as strange as I think it is, but I think that's a little odd. But
it's very challenging.
What are some of the other things that hoarders do that firefighters should be cautious of as they're approaching a residence that is identified as a hoarded or heavy content environment?
Well, number one, they need to look out for booby traps. I mean, now there has not been any documented cases since the Collier's mansion conditions, but just because it's not documented does not mean that they don't exist. I would absolutely look out for some booby traps. I mean, I would think that the compulsion, hopefully, to not hurt anyone outweighs their compulsion to collect more. But absolutely, could that there is a chance of them having some sort of a trap for firefighters out there. Now, especially if that involves some extremely valuable, and I mean really valuable, not perceived value, but really valuable. Some of these folks that collect stuff, the stuff that they collect is very expensive. I mean, there's been a couple of them that have been antiquity dealers, basically, and their belongings were very, I mean, really not perceived value. They were very valuable. But firefighters need to really understand that these folks fill containers. And that's something that's so important, where you might think that in your homes right now, the only spaces that I would assume that are full are probably attics and basements. That's normally where the overflow of belongings goes, so that way it doesn't affect our day-to-day operation. But now take that into a heavy content environment. They may fill their bedroom first. They may fill their basement last. I mean, some common findings that I've discovered is the first two places to become full are attics and basements, but the last two are bathrooms and kitchens. And if you really think about that, Rich, is those are the two rooms that you have to function on a day-to-day basis, is kitchens and bathrooms. So firefighters really need to take into mind when you're assessing it during your 380-degree size up. Do they sleep in the bedroom? Is that the best place to search at 3 o'clock in the morning? And the way you do that is using your senses, using your thermal imaging cameras to identify if there is excessive amount of clutter in those rooms. And hopefully, if you have a neighbor or somebody coming by, they say, hey, by the way, she doesn't sleep in that bedroom anymore. She sleeps in the living room, or he sleeps in the living room.
How often do hoarded environments have more than one occupant?
See, there's no real statistics saying that. I mean, there's no real statistics saying that. To me, the people that I've talked to, it's very common. Very common. Very common to have a whole family of folks living there. So much so that they've got a support group out there called the Children of Hoarding, because they want to break that cycle. Because if you're raised in a hoarded environment, your tendencies, you kind of assimilate into your environment. I mean, we get a lot of our values from our mothers and fathers. So they've actually got support groups to break that chain of events. So it's almost like we always have this stereotypical person that's got a beard down to his waist. He's a hermit, so to speak, if you want to call him that, and very reclusive, and has this massive amounts of junk. It's not always that way. I mean, there's some folks that live within 3 miles of my home that's a family, and they're very well educated, master's degree. They work in universities, but it's just their home is full of clutter, and they've got teenagers, they've got small children. I just really don't. I really want to break down the stereotypical person who's afflicted with compulsive hoarding disorder, because there really is no rhyme or reason who it afflicts.
People fill up their garages too, don't
Absolutely.
they? When they're looking to store their stuff.
Absolutely.
Is that one of the stored?
You know, to me, that's just a natural progression. And I tell you, there's only one way of really knowing what areas are full and what areas are not full, and that's for you being inside the house. I mean, commonly, first responders especially go into these homes in non-fire situations. So for me to sit there and say that you need to suspect that the garage is always full, the attics are never full, and vice versa would probably be me giving you false assumptions. What I will tell you is every area of the home needs assessed. And I'm going to say that again. Every area of the home needs assessed, specifically before and if you commit firefighters to the interior. And I'm going to pull reference back to a case study we did in Elyria, Ohio. The Elyria, Ohio Fire Department went above and beyond the call of duty. Why? They had confirmed entrapment in a mid-entry home, and they searched the entire house. At 3 o'clock in the morning when this fire happens, they went to the bedrooms. Well, lo and behold, the bedrooms is not where she slept anymore. She slept downstairs, just outside the kitchen. The Elyria, Ohio Fire Department went above and beyond that night to make this rescue. Unfortunately, it was not a successful rescue. And in hindsight being 2020, come to find out in Elyria, Ohio, the building inspectors had been there multiple times before. So the only real the the biggest takeaway from that case study was have your building inspectors talking to your fire department. Now, imagine just if that was an EMS agency talking to the fire department, or the fire department talking to the police officers. But really, in heavy content conditions, your scene size up is almost, I don't know if I can use the word 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional, or 5-dimensional, because it's just not the what you see from the exteriors. You really have to dive deeper and think what is full, where's inhabitable, where's the fire at, where's the cold air intakes. It really kind of adds another critical variable in to your decision-making process.
Mm-hmm. Well, I assume that this and so much more is covered in your new book. So why don't you take the listener through the book and tell them, what some of the chapters are that are contained in the book, and some of the things that they might learn in addition to what we're having the conversation about, what they might learn when they get the book.
Awesome. Thanks, Rich, and thanks for having me on today. It was really inspiring for you to keep inspiring me to write this book. And so it starts off with chapter 1, and I explain the dangers that are faced by firefighters in compulsive hoarding. So chapter 1, this title is "What You Don't Know May Kill You." And it seems like when I started doing this research is that firefighters have known about this problem for so long, but yet they really have not studied on how to adjust. They've always just dealt with it. And I'm putting myself in with is learning how to deal with it. So the first chapter, we introduced the reader to why I started studying this stuff, how I started studying this, started studying heavy content environments, and then work your way up to what hoarding is. And that's what chapter 2 covers, is I introduce the reader to what is compulsive hoarding disorder. And I really want firefighters to understand that this, while collecting this material may start as a choice, once the compulsion to collect takes over, they can't stop. So it is a diagnosable psychological disorder. So the introduction to the compulsive hoarder in chapter 2, I give the clinical definition of hoarding, where it's found, who is afflicted by it, how it's found, and some examples of some of the things that they collect. And for example, in 2013, compulsive hoarding disorder was added to the DSM-5. That's the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Diagnosable Disorders for the psychological community. That was a huge point of reference in researching hoarding. Why? Because at that point, they'd considered a part of OCD. In 2013, we've got our own diagnosis. What does that mean for us firefighters? That means hopefully we can know how many people are afflicted with hoarding disorder. How many houses are we going to find that are like this? And the number's growing. The number is growing, but we don't know how much it's growing. So in chapter 2, we walk through some of the myths about hoarding, break down some of the stereotypical boundaries of where you can find them, where you can't find them. We introduce the reader to the Collier's Mansion conditions. In chapter 3, we go straight into the dangers for firefighters. I really only wanted to commit one chapter to the psychological part of it, because the reader I'm writing for in the book is the firefighters. I want them to understand the dangers and complexities found in these types of environments. I share a case study of a successful case study. The firefighter wished to remain anonymous after he attended one of my classes, and he's I'll see if I can find that right here. He described crawling into a cluttered environment, and he said, "Ryan, I could hear your voice stopping me from going any further because you told us if the clutter starts getting above our heads, we need to be mindful of it." And he goes on to share with us that if he would not have stopped, he would have fallen through the floor because of the extended burn times. So we talk about blocked entrances and exits, the ever-present danger of collapse, occupant danger, the danger from the actual debris that's inside of it. What are they collecting? Are they collecting car parts? Are they collecting animals? Some dilapidation dangers. And the biggest one in this chapter is the overstressed dangers. I mean, the number one killer of firefighter, I always say it's the cheeseburgers because I'm a cheeseburger addict. But it is the heart disease, and it is the strokes and heart attacks. So we need to understand that when firefighters are faced with these conditions, their workload just went through the roof, basically. Then chapter 4, I give a brief history of hoarding in the fire service. I share the case study of Elyria, Ohio. It was super awesome of Elyria to share their case study with me and the world, because it was such an in-depth report that they did, and really is a shining example of how the incident commander basically saved the firefighters' lives that night, because he told them, he's like, listen, guys, we're done here. And sadly, the occupant did perish, but the firefighters didn't. It goes on some statistics from the Melbourne, Australia Fire Department, and it gives some operational background of hoarding conditions. And then Chapter 5, How Much Stuff. That's when I offer the reader the hoarding rating scale, how to use it, where to use it, some variables to go into it. So a level 5 heavy content, major structural damage. We've got areas of collapse. We've identified overloaded porches. Minimal access, interior layout, no usable spaces, special hazard. There's a collapse coming. Stay out of the collapse zone, no entry. Call the extra alarms and call in the demolition crew. So that's an example of the level 5. So in Chapter 6, it's heavy content. We explain how a good friend of mine in the brain business came up with this term. Dr. G, do you know who that guy might be?
If you mention him, I might recognize the name.
So thanks to Dr. G, he and I came up with the terminology and he says that really invokes a thought process in incident commanders, as we want to use a non-offensive term to define hoarding, because we don't want to be using, hey, Chief, this is a hoarder over the radio. So in Chapter 6, we introduced the terminology of heavy content, how you and I came up with that, and its uses and its application. Chapter 7 is all about pre-fire planning. Man, if we can pre-fire plan these houses, we are way, way, way ahead of the curve. And in Chapter 7, I walk the reader not only through the process of it, but I show some pictures of a local one, a local heavy content environment here that's grown over the last couple years. And I show basically just a basic pre-fire plan. It doesn't have to be anything too elaborate. It's just a layout and some drawings that goes through all the process. Chapter 8 is the 380-degree size up. And yes, it is. It's not a misprint. 380-degree size up. Shares some valuable insight on how to use your thermal imaging camera, what to look for, where to look for it, establishing flow paths. I know that's a big key word right now in the fire service is the flow path identification. And it's really, really, really important in heavy content to identify cold air intakes. Because if you think about the fire triangles, heat, fuel, and oxygen, we've got tons of fuel and we've got a heat because it's on fire. I mean, the oxygen is the biggest variable that we can control. So the 380-degree size up talks about that. Number 9 is risk versus reward. And is the risk worth it? I mean, do we have confirmed victims trapped that could be alive? And one of the variables about this is we saw it in Charlestown, West Virginia. The lady lived inside the room of occupant, or the room of the fire, for 31 minutes because she was shielded from the heat. So that's another variable. Matter of fact, I share in the book that the incident commander had actually picked up the radio and said, "This is command. We're switching from an active rescue to a recovery mode." And lo and behold, 30 seconds later, they say, "Hey, LT, we found the victim and she's alive." And that was an amazing story. If you've not listened to that interview from Charlestown, West Virginia, head on over to Chamber of Hoarders and listen to the lieutenant. I'm not going to attempt his name. It was pretty awesome last name, and he really shares some insight with that. Chapter 10's offensive operation. We share the kill the flashover, where we did 3 different burns with control of the air and without control of the air. We actually did a vent enter search procedure where we need to talk about air control and controlling the flow path if we want to go inside these environments. And then Chapter 13's defensive operation. No risk, no reward, stay out. No risk versus no reward, stay out. We talk about that was Chapter 12. Chapter 13 is all about air management. It's something that I found in all of my travels is firefighters don't pay a whole lot of attention to air management. They always wait till their vibra alert goes off before they start coming back out. Well, when you're dealing with these cluttered conditions, you're going to be using a lot more air. So we talk about air management, whether it's the firefighter level, officer level, the chief officer. We talk about overhaul. The next chapter is all about overhauling. One of the most dangerous times in heavy contents fires during the overhaul process. So that's when we need to make sure that we're not letting our guard down. We're paying close attention to collapse, signs of collapse. Our firefighters are worn out. We've missed Chicago fire. We've missed the last shift. We're hungry. And then at the end of it, we wrap it up with an EMS chapter. And as a bonus content at the end, we've got a sample SOG. So I have a lot of firefighters and fire chiefs asking for a standard operating guideline. It is just a draft. It is just a sample. It needs to be adjusted for their home areas and standards, but it kind of gives a guideline of what you need to do to prepare your department for heavy content fires, Doc.
Wow.
Yeah, that's only two. That's only
a lot of great content.
That's only 2 years of my life in there. No big deal, right?
Ryan, estimate for me how many case studies you've evaluated or where people have contacted with you and shared their experiences with hoarded fires. I mean, this isn't all just, obviously, from what you've said, not your experiences in your fire department, but many cases from all over, right?
Right. And anywhere from Melbourne, Australia to the 200 Wellesley Street in Toronto, Canada. I had the opportunity of speaking to the assistant chief from the London Fire Brigade, describing a collapse anywhere from the Peruvian fire service. So I would venture to say that I'm probably well over 50 or 60 individual fire departments that I have spoken to directly. Now, each one of those have not received an in-depth, quote-unquote, case study, but I try to learn the high points and low points of each. And when I originally started, it was harder to get folks on board because, I mean, let's face it, not all of us like being evaluated all the time, and not very many fire departments do real good after action reviews. But now that this topic has gained some traction and they understand that I'm doing this in a positive way, I get them all the time. I mean, it's so funny that even an informal text message from someone say, "Hey, Ryan, I found this car outside the gym that's full of stuff. Imagine what their house looks like." It's almost a constant stream of learning. And give an example of an unusual thing that I found that you talked about unusual that I left out is during the Charlestown, West Virginia case, they threw a ladder to the side C Charlie for a vent enter search operation. They threw the ladder on the extension cord, ran from the next door neighbor's house with the extension cord. Just so happens that when they set the ladder on it, they pierced the shielding of the extension cord and energized the ladder. So the guys came back down the ladder and they grabbed it and figured out it had been energized, thinking that the meter had been pulled. Well, it was an extension cord from the neighbor's house.
Wow.
So it's just the little tidbits like that I've captured. And just like the example of the firefighter telling me that if he would have kept crawling, that he would have ended up in the basement. I think those are the ones that are really the best takeaways that I've found outside the official case studies, of course. But man, it's constant. It is absolutely a constant stream of a daily. And I'll give you an example. Last night in Phoenix, just outside of Phoenix, rural metro had a working heavy content fire in a mobile home park. So I had a chance to share that on Periscope today. And the challenges just from the news, I haven't spoken with the fire department from the rural metro out there, but just the news coverage says they had a hard time getting inside the structure. But just looking at it from the outside, I can tell you they had challenges with access issues. They had multiple vehicles that were on fire that apparently were full of stuff. Looked like they were not functioning vehicles. They had privacy fences. They had chain link fences. I think it's been about 3 months ago, they had a LA City fire, and it looked like it was in a commercial district with a residence in between, and it was an external fire. It was an exterior fire. It was his junk in the side yard of his house. So it wasn't a structural fire. It was basically like a lumber yard fire outside. So a lot of those tidbits come in as well. So it's almost like a constant stream of 2 or 3 times a day.
Are there any documented cases that you have been involved with where firefighters have been hurt or killed as a result of operating in a hoarded environment?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The one that really is rips my gut out is a Baltimore County firefighter. and you can hear it over the audio that the details are still coming out. The NIOSH investigation is still out. Baltimore County released the study, and his name was Gene Kirchner. And Gene was a young, good-looking firefighter. He was a twin brother, matter of fact, and they were searching for life. They had confirmed entrapment. So, I mean, this was a high-risk, high-reward environment. And Gene lost his life searching for another life. And I tell you, Baltimore County's report, if you haven't read it, I'll post it up on either on the social media over on the Chamber of Hoarders. It's gut-wrenching to hear the audio of his pass alarm going off, and the firefighters, thank God, were able to remove him, said, listen, Chief, I think we have a hoarder house. And it just, I play that in my presentation, and it almost brings me to tears to know that we've lost a firefighter for a condition that's something that I won't say it's preventable, that's discoverable. And I'd like to know some days, Gene, did you realize this was going on? And man, thank you for your service. And what was the conditions you found? And you can hear the voices of the firefighters that find them. Like, listen, we can't get through here. And that's my mission. I don't want to hear no more stories of Gene Kirchner's, because I'm telling you, it's gut-wrenching to hear it. And if you really take the time to look at the house that Gene, and they were able to save, I think they saved all 3 occupants. So he did not die in vain. They did save 3 victims from this house. But man, the house that they went to, you can tell from space that was cluttered.
Now, if we haven't been taught or practiced alternative strategies and tactics, we're probably going to find ourselves deploying our standard structure fire strategy and tactics at hoarded environments if we don't know any better to do anything differently.
It is.
And that's really what your focus is on, is changing perspective, because we're doing an auto repair on a motorcycle, for lack of an alternate
It is
analogy. There's bunches that we could use, but the standard tactics and strategy don't fit that kind of fire, right?
Imagine for a minute if you go 1 3/4 through the front door, you get to the front door, you knock the front door completely off its hinges, and you leave that flow path of cold air going in there, and all of a sudden you find out behind that door is a stack of cardboard boxes that's 6 feet tall. Now, you leave that door open. You can't close that door because you just ripped it off the hinges. And somebody from next door says, Mr. Pennington, she doesn't use that front door anymore. She crawls in and out of this window over here. Matter of fact, I can see her in there about 3 to 4 feet laying inside there. I mean, what are you going to feel like? Or what kind of, I can't even imagine having that. And these are the things that I want firefighters to realize is a lot of times they don't use their front door anymore. And if you go crawling into these places, and if you're listening to this audio podcast, please don't crawl over stacks of crap that you don't know what it is. Imagine if you go diving head first over the stack of debris, your face piece comes off. It collapses under your weight. And that's why we study. It's why you spend so much time on situational awareness. And that's why I'm so passionate about hoarding, is I want to honor Gene Kirchner. I don't want the what happened to Gene to happen to any more firefighters anywhere across this world. I always tell people, if I die, I want the Pennington drill made up. What killed Pennington? It's probably going to be the cheeseburgers. But I just want that information out there and say, this is what happened. This is how we need to learn from it. And this is how we honor him or her, by taking this information and sharing it around the world.
Well, you can't ask for any more of a noble cause to drive your passion than that. Where can people find you? I mean, you're everywhere. So let's start with, you mentioned Periscope. Talk about Twitter, Facebook, website, Amazon, cork in a bottle. What are all the places that people can can pick up on your message or contact you through?
The number two places you need to go, and Dr. G, you and I have had tons of conversations about this, is I have two websites that I maintain. The Chamber of Hoarders, just chamberofhoarders.com. It's coming back alive. Matter of fact, I spent almost 4 hours on it today updating the content, and I've got some help actually putting the hoarding information out there. I want that to be the porthole to the world if you have a question about fighting fires in hoarding houses, EMS responses in hoarding houses. And hopefully we're going to add some family member resources out there. I know that is some of the most frustrated folks out there when it comes to this complex disorder is the family of the actual occupant. So hopefully we're going to add some more stuff for the family members out there. And you always ask me, Ryan, what's next? What's your next book? And I'm not so sure that it's not going to be the Firefighter's Guide to Hoarding Safety for Occupants. I really think that's on the horizon coming up. The second one is, man, I'm hugely proud, I guess, is hugely excited to join the Penwell bloggers, and you head on over to jumpseattraining.com. Chief Bobby Halton extended the olive branch and asked if I could come over and do some blogging for him, and I'm super excited to work with Bill Carey and the Firefighter Nation. Now, as far as social media, at Jump Seat Views is the porthole to my phone. If you need to get a hold of me in a matter of seconds, it's at Jump Seat Views on Twitter, and facebook.com/FF Ryan Pennington is my professional page. Unfortunately, Facebook limits the amount of personal contacts at 5,000 folks, and I think I have almost 150 people in the personal side that I can't accept as friends anymore. It's not that I don't want your friendship or your connection. It's just that I cannot accept that any longer. But now Facebook, unknowns to me, does have a button like Twitter that has follow. So if you've requested me as a personal friend, head on over and hit the follow button, and you can follow. So you'll have the same interaction ability in the Facebook group as that. LinkedIn, I think we crested over 4,500 contacts or something like that in LinkedIn. That's the professional where I will be double posting everything over to LinkedIn. And something new that I've gotten you, Dr. G, in is Periscope. Man, I'm super pumped about the ability to interact and have live video feeds. So we just finished up the number 6 Periscope, and hopefully each Periscope will be an interactive sessions with you, the listener, and you can ask direct questions, but hopefully we'll have some education as well. As I really want to do a series of motivational Periscopes, and I've almost thought about even setting it up as almost like a short keynote to get people fired up for the fire service. So if you can't find me between any of those social media channels, head on over to jumpseatviews at iCloud.com. It's the same thing as my Twitter, and I will answer your email promptly.
Okay. Well, then there's no reason why somebody can't find you. And I'll also put a link to your email in the show notes page for this episode as well. So if you missed it, Ryan was also episode number 40, and that's been a few years ago. But we talked about his passion for hoarding back in episode 40 as well. So if you wanted to hear more about that, you could go back and catch that episode too. Ryan, thanks for taking some time to be with a guest with me today. I really appreciate your passion. I think your book is going to be groundbreaking for the fire service, and it's like so overdue. I can't even imagine how somebody had not picked that topic up and ran with it. And I'm so glad that you did. And I think that you're moving the rock for making the fire service safer in this particular area. And hoarding is not going to go away as an issue afflicting the fire service. So thank you so much for that gift to all of us.
Well, thank you for the constant rich slaps. Thank you for being my mentor for 18 years. But it's so funny that
most people don't know what that means.
Yeah, but, a rich slap is a text that says, "Hey Ryan, is the
suffice to say I've given you some encouragement."
Yeah. Hey Ryan, is the book done yet? No, Rich. Smap, smap, smap. So, thank you for the encouragement.
All right, Ryan. Thank you. Thanks, Ryan. Love your passion for the topic of fighting fires in hoarded environments. Before I close today's episode, I want to take a moment to thank the departments and organizations that have hosted recent Situational Awareness Matters tour stops. Your efforts to bring this valuable and powerful training on situational awareness and high-risk, high-consequence decision-making to your members and others within your region are greatly appreciated. Recently, programs were conducted at Fire Rescue International in Atlanta, Georgia. That is the conference for the International Association of Fire Chiefs. There I delivered 4 programs on situational awareness, high-risk decision-making, and training for failure. And of course, I'm now at the National Fire Academy's Executive Fire Officer Graduate Symposium, delivering a 20-minute Chuck Chat on creating the thinking firefighter. Upcoming programs, if you're interested in getting connected with me, by the time this episode airs, the following 2 tour stops will have already been held. September 12th in Plainfield, Michigan, September 14th in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. You can also catch up with me on September 23rd at the Fire Rescue Canada Conference. This is the conference of the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs. I'll be giving the closing keynote at that conference on September 23rd. September 26th in Delran, New Jersey for the Delran Fire Department. September 28th, the Ontario Fire College in Gravenhurst, Ontario. October 2 and 3, the Champions Fire Protection District in Houston, Texas. October 7th, Fire Shows Reno in Reno, Nevada. I'll be giving the keynote address there. October 9th, the New Hampshire Fire Chiefs Association in Concord, New Hampshire. October 14-15, Pearland Fire Department in Pearland, Texas. October 20, the Association of Air Medical Transport Conference in Long Beach, California. October 22, the Emergency Preparedness and Hazardous Materials Conference in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania. October 26th and 27th, the Hampton Roads Fire Chiefs Association in Hampton Roads, Virginia. And October 29, the Tennessee Department of Homeland Security in Knoxville, Tennessee. If you're interested in attending a upcoming Situational Awareness Matters tour stop, head over to the samatters.com website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage that says Upcoming Events Schedule. Here's hoping there's a tour stop near you and we'll get a chance to meet up. If you're interested in adding your department or association to the lineup of tour stops, contact me through the website and we'll get something set up for you. If you're not a member of the SA Matters community of learners, please consider joining. There are more than 5,000 members connected here on SA Matters, sharing ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, how to train members to be critical thinkers and resilient problem solvers. Membership is free, and when you sign up, I'll send you a special report I've created for the new members called 25 Best Practices for Improving First Responder Safety. If you're not a member yet, head over to the samatters.com website, click on the red box on the right side of the home page that says Free Membership. As a reminder, every episode of the SA Matters radio show has a corresponding show notes page on the samatters.com website. All the most recent episodes scroll on the home page, but for older episodes, you go to samatters.com / and enter the episode number, which I always mention at the start of each show. So, for example, if you wanted to access, say, episode 60, open up your internet browser, enter www.samatters.com / 60, and that'll take you to the page that contains the link for that episode. The show notes page contains additional information and resources about the episode, and depending on who the guest is, there may also be incident scene pictures, videos, and audio of near-miss events, and the contact information for our guests. On the show notes page, you can also ask me questions and leave your feedback about the episode. If you want to get connected with me on social media, you can follow @RichGasaway or @SAMatters on Twitter. And the SA Matters Twitter community are almost 16,000 followers strong. And thanks for all those who are connected with me on Twitter. If you follow the @RichGasaway on Twitter, I'm going to start also doing short video segments using a Twitter product called Periscope. If you want to get connected with me there, you would download the Periscope app onto your phone, and I'm going to be putting out video content that's live, and then people can text in questions or messages, and it's just kind of a really cool new medium. I already did my first Periscope introductory video. I didn't plan on going that long, but I think we ended up going over 30 minutes talking about situational awareness. So if you want to follow at Rich Gasaway, the announcements of when I'll be live on Periscope will be put on the Twitter feed there. You can also get connected on Facebook by liking the SA Matters page on Facebook, and on LinkedIn you can find me by searching Rich Gasaway. And thanks to everyone who's connected with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you like the show, please consider going over to iTunes or Stitcher Radio and subscribing. Search for the SA Matters Radio, SA Matters Radio, on iTunes or Stitcher. And if you would, please consider leaving some feedback while you're there. If you like the show, I'd really appreciate you giving it a 5-star review. Not only does that motivate me, but it'll also help others to find the show. Well, that's it. Episode 73 is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Ryan Pennington, author of Hoarder Homes, Piles of Hazards for Firefighters. And he runs the website chamberofhoarders.com. Thank you to our sponsor, Midwest Fire, and thank you to all of our live event hosts. I sincerely appreciate your support. Thank you to our listeners for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate the gift of your time to get connected with me. I'm very humbled by that. Be safe out there, and may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gasaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gasaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgasaway.com.